Marvel, Hela's husband breaks the universe. Please like, share, and subscribe. Episode 91, The 10 Rings, Mandarin, Young People Who Don't Know a Thing About Martial Arts Virtues, Part 1. 10 years ago, Aldrich Killian was a nobody. At that time, he admired Tony Stark, the young genius. However, he used to be depressed, and spent a lot of effort to meet Tony. He told Tony about his research results regarding a genetic research project called Project Extremis. Unfortunately, Tony was young and senseless at that time, and he didn't keep his word. Tony had made an appointment to meet with Killian on the rooftop in the evening to discuss Killian's Project Extremis. But, Tony spent the whole night talking to a beautiful girl. On the other hand, Killian waited on the rooftop until the early morning, going from hope to despair, and then he completely gave up. Since then, Killian had no more admiration for Tony. He replaced his admiration with endless hatred. He swore that sooner or later, he would let Tony feel the humiliation he had been subjected to. So this was the incident which happened 10 years ago. It could be said that everything that Tony experienced today was the bitter fruit he planted 10 years ago. At this moment, Tony didn't know that the next target of the 10 rings, and Killian, was his beloved woman, Miss Pepper. Yibai didn't have to wait too long. A few days later, Tony, who had recovered from his injury, came to Yibai's manor with the information of the Black Hand behind the scenes. With Tony's Jarvis, and with S.H.I.E.L.D. investigation, any organization on the planet could be found very quickly. It has been confirmed that the culprit who threw the missiles at us is the famous 10 Rings. This organization is very powerful, it controls many terrorist organizations, and has deals with almost all major arms companies. This is a giant organization hidden in the shadows, and Mandarin is the head of this giant. Tony took out the information he had sorted out and gave it Yibai. So, where exactly is this Mandarin? Yibai asked Tony. He didn't care about how powerful the 10 Rings organization was. He just wanted to know where the man who threw missiles at his manor was. If Yibai had not been prepared, his manor would have collapsed again, which was something that Yibai could not tolerate. Who could tolerate the collapse of their own house once every 3 days? At the moment, we are still tracing the whereabouts of Mandarin. This guy is too mysterious. At present, we have only tracked down a leader named Killian, which is also one of our targets. With that said, Tony Stark took out a picture of Killian. Yibai looked at the photo and nodded. You can deal with this guy named Killian. I'm going to deal with the rat named Mandarin. Yibai said to Tony and assigned his own task to Tony. Tony and S.H.I.E.L.D. could not find the location of Mandarin, but it did not mean that Yibai was also unable to find him. Tony nodded while being a little puzzled. Just when Tony wanted to say something more, his cell phone suddenly rang. Tony took a look at his cell phone and found that it was his good friend Happy who had called him. What's the matter? Tony didn't avoid Yibai and asked his friend directly. Tony, I think you have to come back immediately. Miss Pepper. Miss Pepper was taken away. Happy's voice was a little frustrated, he felt that he hadn't done what Tony had told him. Most importantly, Miss Potts was missing, and no one knew what would happen to her. After hearing Happy's words, Tony's face suddenly became ugly. I'll be right back. Wait for me. After the previous crisis, Tony's relationship with Miss Potts had been established. Now that he suddenly heard that his girlfriend was kidnapped, it was no wonder Tony would become so anxious. Yibai nodded to Tony and motioned him to do his own business. At the same time, Yibai also knew that this should be the plot of Iron Man 3. Next, Tony was going to fight with Dr. Killian, who had been injected with the Extremis virus. Unsurprisingly, Tony would win the final victory. As for Dr. Killian, Yibai had no interest in him. He was just a small character, a puppet of the real mastermind. The real mastermind behind the scenes was Mandarin, and Yibai wanted to deal with him. Soon, Tony left Yibai's manor in a hurry. He was going to save his girlfriend and end the grudges he had created 10 years ago. As for Yibai, after Tony left, he found Hela. Can you help me find a guy called Mandarin? I have to settle some scores with him. Yibai asked Hela. Hela was the main reason why he was so confident about finding Mandarin. Yibai knew that Hela had subdued Hydra, and Yibai had no objection to it. Although Hydra was very scary for people on Earth, in the eyes of Yibai and Hela, it was just a small toy. It was the kind of thing that could only come in handy occasionally, but was useless in most cases. I'll help you find him. Hela nodded and did not refuse. Then she called Alexander Pierce, the leader of Hydra, with her phone. After listening to her request, Alexander Pierce naturally did not dare to waste time and started looking for Mandarin. You should know that Hela was the god of Hydra now. Soon, after going through a lot of files and using a lot of Hydra's power, Pierce finally got some information. Mandarin is the leader of the Ten Rings, a very dangerous guy. Although Hydra and the Ten Rings have cooperated before, we still don't have much information about Mandarin. I only know that he should be somewhere in the Arab region right now. If you can give me some more time, I should be able to find more. Pierce replied, with a very humble attitude. Even through the phone, you could imagine Pierce nodding and bowing. I see. That's it. Just like before, Hela was still cold to others, and after a faint reply, she informed Yi Bai of the news. Yi Bai didn't hesitate, and planned to go to the Arab region immediately. I'll be back early, around noon, so you don't need to make lunch. I can make it myself. Before leaving, Yi Bai did not forget to remind Hela that he didn't want to suffer the torment of dark cooking for lunch. Okay, then I'll wait for you to come back. Hela said to Yi Bai with a smile. She didn't realize the meaning of Yi Bai's words. She thought Yi Bai wanted her to have more rest. Not long after Yi Bai left, Hela held a book and flipped through it. The name of the book was The Complete Guide to Cooking. It seems that Hela still couldn't forget her dream of becoming a chef. Speaking of the Arab region, the first impression of people about it was chaos. Because terrorist organizations had taken root here, instead of being one of them, it might be called the most dangerous area on the planet. However, what not many people know is that most of these terrorist organizations were only established after the arrival of some Western countries. But Yi Bai didn't care about these. His purpose in coming to this region was to find the Mandarin. The Mandarin dared to throw a missile at Yi Bai's house. If Yi Bai didn't screw off Mandarin's head, Yi Bai would count it as if he lost. Although Hela only found the approximate location of Mandarin through Hydra, it was enough for Yi Bai. Episode 92, The Ten Rings, Mandarin, Young People Who Don't Know a Thing About Martial Arts Virtues, Part 2. At this time, Yi Bai was flying constantly in the high altitude of the Arab region, looking at the ground below. In Yi Bai's sight, the land below had basically no secrets at all. Yi Bai could even see through the mines at a depth of 1,000 meters. There was oil, natural gas, and even a gold mine. With this superhuman vision, Yi Bai could easily become a mineral tycoon even if he wasn't a copywriter anymore. But there was no need for that. Yi Bai kept his purpose in mind. Soon, Yi Bai found out where the Mandarin was. This old geezer actually built his base more than 100 meters deep underground. No wonder even S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't find him. Yi Bai didn't hesitate. He dived straight down while his eyes released super heat rays, making a deep hole in the earth. Mandarin's underground base was as hard as steel, but Yi Bai easily made an opening in it. Then Yi Bai went down the hole and entered Mandarin's base. The old man looked at Yi Bai with surprise because he suddenly appeared in his underground base. He was also a little confused. After all, Yi Bai's appearance was too dramatic. But his face quickly returned to normal. After all, he was an old guy who had weathered many storms. Although he was a little confused, he didn't panic at all. With 10 rings on his fingers, he sat on his throne and looked down at Yi Bai. In front of him, there were countless members of the 10 Rings in traditional robes who were looking fiercely at Yi Bai, who suddenly broke into their base. Who are you? Are you provoking me by breaking into my kingdom like this? The Mandarin spoke, his tone was mixed with anger and arrogance. This was also normal. The Mandarin had been in a high position since his birth. Later, after getting 10 magic rings, he became one of the emperors of the underground world and had been in that high position for a very long time. It was normal for him to be a little dignified and arrogant. What, you just dropped a missile at my house, now you don't even remember me? Yi Bai also coldly looked at the old guy in front of him. To be precise, he was looking at the 10 rings in the hands of the Mandarin. Each of these 10 rings had a special magic ability. It was also the origin of the name of the 10 Rings organization. Although the Mandarin had a small reputation, his strength was terrifying. He was born in 1920. He learned martial arts from childhood and almost reached the peak of the human body. Later, this guy encountered a spaceship that had crashed on the Earth. In that spacecraft, the Mandarin learned the technology and magic of an unknown alien civilization and obtained these 10 rings. Each of these rings contained magic, one of the advanced powers of the Marvel Universe. Based on this alone, the strength of the Mandarin could not be low. In the original plot, Mandarin was the sworn enemy of Iron Man. Tony was unable to defeat Mandarin until he grew to a very high level. If Tony faced Mandarin right now, he would be killed in seconds. Are you Tony Stark? Isn't he white? After hearing what Yi Bai said, the Mandarin was also a little confused. He didn't know Yi Bai, he only remembered that he had dropped some missiles at Tony Stark's house. Moreover, Yi Bai did not wear an iron suit, so he was not Iron Man at all. In fact, Mandarin had been pitted by Killian. Mandarin only wanted to shoot Tony because Tony had insulted him. But who knows what was wrong with Killian, he accidentally fired 2 missiles at Yi Bai's manor. As a result, Yi Bai found the Mandarin. But the Mandarin did not even know who Yi Bai was. It could be said that this was a disaster for the Mandarin, and it was brought to him by his pig teammates. If he knew the reason, Mandarin would definitely kill Killian. Wasn't this cheating? It's okay if you don't know me, I just need to know you. You are not a good thing anyway. Yi Bai had no intention to talk anymore with Mandarin. He was here for revenge, not for debate. Since Mandarin did not want to admit it, he would beat him until he admitted it. The Mandarin also lost his patience to explain to Yi Bai. Since Yi Bai was an enemy, he decided to destroy him quickly. Thinking of this, Mandarin took a look at his men, and those men quickly rushed toward Yi Bai one after another. Although Mandarin's men were originally ordinary people, they had been transformed by Mandarin's magic. They could not be called humans anymore. Their strength was stronger than Captain America, and the body transformed by magic was invulnerable. However, in Yi Bai's eyes, they were no different from ordinary people. With Yi Bai's thought, a golden portal appeared under the feet of all of Mandarin's men. In the blink of an eye, then they fell down and were swallowed by the golden portal. If there was no accident, Mandarin's men would appear at an altitude of 8,000 meters. Then, in a free fall, they would return to the earth they were familiar with. As for whether they would die or live, that wasn't Yi Bai's concern. Against enemies who could not fly, this portal was really a godly technique. As long as you were able to draw the portal fast enough, whether your enemy was sent to the sky or the underground, or on the bottom of the sea at a depth of 10,000 meters, you had the final say. After seeing Yi Bai's portal, Mandarin's expression became serious. Mage of Kamar Taj, I remember I didn't provoke you sorcerers. Mandarin looked at Yi Bai and said slowly. He seemed a little afraid of the Kamar Taj's mages. As an old monster who had lived for nearly 100 years, Mandarin knew many things that ordinary people didn't know. For example, the few hidden forces on Earth. Kamataj was one of them. You just need to know that I'm here to screw off your head. Yi Bai didn't give Mandarin any chance to explain himself. It's not like he was a good guy anyway. Now that they had met, today was Mandarin's unlucky day. In the next moment, countless mirror butterflies flew out of Yi Bai's body. In the blink of an eye, these mirror butterflies enveloped Mandarin completely. When Mandarin looked around, he found that he had appeared on a plane. Yi Bai, however, was suspended above his head. He was looking down at him. Mirror space. The Mandarin recognized Yi Bai's technique and knew that he had been pulled into the mirror space by Yi Bai. This made Mandarin's face turn bitter. He didn't expect that the junior in front of him was so ignorant of martial arts virtues that he just started fighting when they met and didn't even give him an opportunity to explain himself. Episode 93, The Mandarin's Death. Mandarin was really depressed. Even now, he did not know exactly what was going on. Yi Bai was obviously here to seek revenge, but Mandarin really did not know when and why he and Yi Bai became enemies. Yi Bai also didn't explain it to him. He started fighting as soon as he came. He did not explain why he came to seek revenge. But in the end, Mandarin was still a strong person, and he had his pride. Yi Bai, a junior, took action as soon as he came up. Did he really think that Mandarin was easy to bully? So after entering the mirror space, Mandarin didn't hesitate to retaliate. Mandarin raised his left hand and the ring on the index finger of his left hand suddenly started shining. Then, a 100-meter-long flame came out of the ring and rushed towards Yi Bai. 10 rings, 10 kinds of magic. Flame magic was one of them. Yi Bai looked at the oncoming flame with an arrogant smile. With a thought, a huge shield composed of golden mana stood in front of Yi Bai. The 100-meter-long flame hit the magic shield, and countless flames splashed in all directions. But none of them broke through the golden shield, and they couldn't hurt Yi Bai at all. Mandarin's expression also became more serious. Yi Bai's performance was enough for him to be completely serious. Then, the ring on the little finger of the Mandarin's left hand also burst into light, and a white icicle was instantly shot towards Yi Bai, which froze everything in its way. Together with the previous flame, Mandarin looked like the god of ice and fire. Yi Bai naturally did not sit back and wait for death. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the icicle, which was coming towards him. Then Yi Bai's eyes suddenly brightened and two orange-red heat rays shot out. They fell directly on the oncoming icicle. The super high temperature of heat rays caused the icicle to melt. Judging from the scene, Yi Bai and the Mandarin were on the same level. If one of them wanted to win against the other one, then these means were definitely not enough. The Mandarin gritted his teeth and raised his right hand. On the ring finger of his right hand, a ring inlaid with golden squares gradually brightened up. In the next second, a yellow energy beam suddenly shot out of it. All the substances, molecules, and even atoms in the path of this yellow energy beam were destroyed. Disintegration beam was the most powerful move among the 10 rings. Every time it was used, there would be a 20-minute cooldown. This move had always been Mandarin's trump card. But now Mandarin could not care about hiding his strength anymore. He used everything he had to defeat Yi Bai quickly. Facing Mandarin's attack this time, Yi Bai was slightly satisfied. Such a move was decent, otherwise this fight would be too boring. Yes, Yi Bai was actually playing all the time and did not take Mandarin seriously at all. Otherwise, Yi Bai would have killed Mandarin in seconds. Yi Bai gave Mandarin the opportunity to attack because he wanted to see the power of the 10 rings. By the way, he also wanted to accumulate experience of fighting against magicians, so that he wouldn't get confused when he encountered stronger magicians in the future. Ever since he got the body template of General Zod and Ancient Doomsday, Yi Bai had been scared of magic in his heart. Because now, he was a real evil god. The magic resistance of General Zod and Ancient Doomsday was too low. Yi Bai had to make up for his shortcomings in this area as much as possible. It would be great if he could somehow get immunity from magic. If that was the case, then Yi Bai would simply not look at the Mandarin more than once and directly kill him. Instead, he had to accumulate experience of fighting against magicians like this. If the Mandarin knew what Yi Bai was thinking, he might have vomited blood due to anger, as Yi Bai had never regarded him as his opponent. Right now, Mandarin was full of hope that his disintegration beam could cause fatal damage to Yi Bai. But unfortunately, a white energy began to gather in front of Yi Bai, and in the blink of an eye it turned into a white magic shield which completely enveloped Yi Bai. Then, the yellow disintegration beam arrived and hit the white magic shield. Although the disintegration beam was powerful, Yi Bai's white magic shield was stronger. It completely blocked the disintegration beam. When Mandarin saw the white energy, he was shocked and his eyes almost popped out. The power of white magic. The Mandarin was still knowledgeable, and he could see the origin of Yi Bai's magic shield at a glance. It was precisely because of this that the Mandarin realized that something was really wrong. Before Yi Bai used white magic, Mandarin still felt that Yi Bai was just a senior mage, and he still had a chance of winning. But after Yi Bai used the white magic, he completely lost his confidence. Mandarin was also a man who was famous in the magic world. Naturally, he knew the reputation of white magic. After all, white magic was the famous skill of the Supreme Master Gu Yi. As his own half-hearted magic confronted the famous white magic, the Mandarin did not have the slightest confidence at this moment. The only thing that he could now count on was probably that Yi Bai's mastery of white magic was not high, so that he still had a chance to live. Otherwise, he could only wait for death. Thinking of this, the Mandarin gritted his teeth and planned to give it a go. At the next moment, the 9 magic rings on the hands of the Mandarin bloomed brightly. Then came the overwhelming magic attacks. Electromagnetic light wave, flame, frost, laser, thunder, storm, mind control. Countless magic attacks crowded the whole space, and there was no place to hide from them. Occasionally, a magic attack would land on a distant hill. As a result, the hill would disintegrate directly, and the earth and rock would fly into the air. One could imagine how powerful these magics were. And traditional human weapons were powerless in front of these magical attacks. It was right to say that the 10 magic rings in his hands alone were enough to sweep some small and medium-sized countries on the earth. Their army's firepower was not as good as a Mandarin. However, as the main target of countless magic attacks, Yi Bai shook his head. These magic attacks were too weak in his opinion. Disintegration beam from the 10 rings of Mandarin could still be considered a decent attack. As for the other attacks, they didn't pose any threat to Yi Bai. Thinking of this, Yi Bai didn't have any interest in continuing to play anymore because he couldn't accumulate any experience by fighting Mandarin. "It's over, Mandarin," Yi Bai said faintly, and then his figure disappeared from Mandarin's vision. Before Mandarin could react, he felt a pain in his neck, and then he completely lost consciousness. Episode 94, Tony's Banquet. Yi Bai looked at the Mandarin who had no signs of life, shook his head disdainfully, and then neatly pulled out the rings from his hands. Although these rings didn't seem very strong to Yi Bai, they were better than nothing. He was also picking it up for nothing, anyway. As for Yi Bai's speed, that was basic operation. This was a mirrored space, not Earth, so Yi Bai didn't need to restrain his speed. The speed brought to Yi Bai by the body template of General Zod alone was almost the same as the Flash, not to mention the bonus brought by the body template of the ancient Doomsday. If Yi Bai wanted, he could even run 180 laps around the Earth in 1 second. But if he did that, all the air currents on the Earth would be disordered, and the climate would deteriorate extremely. With Yi Bai's speed, it would be strange if the Mandarin could even react. If Mandarin was really so strong, why would he need to be so afraid of the Supreme Mage? In this case, not to mention competing with the Supreme Mage, at the very least, the Supreme Mage would have to tolerate his existence. And done. Let's call it a day and go home. Yi Bai thought faintly. Yi Bai's heart didn't have the slightest ups and downs at killing the villain Mandarin. It was like he did a small, insignificant thing. However, his anger because his house was bombed by the missiles before was almost vented. As for Tony, he should be done with Aldrich too, Yi Bai thought with some uncertainty. Similar to what Yi Bai thought, Tony also eventually took care of his opponent. Although the process was a bit difficult, fortunately the ending was beautiful. By the way, just like Yi Bai, Tony also got his own loot, the Extremis virus. That was the lifelong research of Dr. Killian. It was a virus that could quickly heal human wounds and greatly develop the human body's potential. Even an ordinary person could directly become a powerful superhero after taking this virus. However, this virus had a very serious side effect. When taking this virus, there was a very high probability of blowing up. The previous terrorist attack on the stadium was actually done by a person who had drunk the Extremis virus. He had blown himself up in the audience. Seeing Miss Potts, who was injected with the Extremis virus and merged with it perfectly, Tony inevitably had some thoughts about it as well. This was normal. In such a chaotic era, who didn't want to be stronger? Tony was the same, not to mention that he had set an almost impossible goal for himself. He wanted to challenge God. However, Tony had no plans to take the Extremis virus for the time being. The side effects of this virus were still too great, so Tony decided to study it first. He had only one life. He didn't want to bet his life for this little virus. Come on, let's go back. Looking at Miss Pepper coming to him, Tony said with a smile and put away his thoughts for the time being. He didn't plan to tell Pepper about his plan, otherwise Pepper would definitely think that he was crazy. Moreover, Yi Bai had just saved his life. He was his savior. If he immediately began to study the armor meant to deal with his savior, it would be a bit too unethical. At least he couldn't tell Potts about this kind of thing that would damage his image in her eyes. Iron Man still wanted to save face. Miss Potts didn't think much. She helped Tony, who was limping a little, leave the battlefield. After ending the battle with Dr. Killian and solving the crisis of the 10 rings, Tony made a very important decision. He was going to marry Potts. They were going to start a family together and share each other's happiness and sorrow. In fact, as early as a few years ago, Tony and Potts had already been in a husband and wife relationship, but neither of them had made it clear. But after these recent events, Tony also put away his playful heart and really began to become mature. After the successful proposal, Tony held a bachelor party and invited all his friends to attend. Naturally, Yi Bai also received the invitation, so he brought Hela over to participate. Since becoming the Queen of Asgard, Hela's personality had changed a lot. In the past, Hela only communicated with Yi Bai and completely ignored Yi Bai's friends and entertainment. But now, Hela had learned to integrate herself into Yi Bai's life. Her attending this party with Yi Bai was the best proof. In addition to Yi Bai, many other people attended this party. Most of them were superheroes, such as the members of the Avengers. From S.H.I.E.L.D. Coulson and Nick Fury, as well as some of Tony's business friends also participated. When Yi Bai arrived, he was not warmly received. After all, there were not many people who knew him. Yi Bai was actually very low profile, and there were only a few people who knew about his strength. Among them, Nick Fury was one. Seeing Yi Bai and Hela, Nick Fury, who was joking with Captain America, immediately turned serious. His body became straight, and he became nervous. This black-hearted marinated egg was indeed really clever when facing Yi Bai and Hela. This was very different from his usual arrogant behavior. Yi Bai also saw Nick Fury and the others, but he didn't respond. He didn't feel much about the Avengers, so naturally he wouldn't try to get along with them. Instead, he took Hela's hand and led her to a quiet corner, and then whispered a joke to Hela. This time he only came to the party just to give Tony face. After all, Tony was his friend. Not long after Yibai sat down, an old acquaintance found him. "Hi, Yibai, long time no see." "Hello Hela, we meet again." It was Dr. Banner who came over. Yibai hadn't seen him for a long time. Compared with last time when Dr. Banner had been hiding, he was obviously very nourished this time. Maybe it was because after he joined the Avengers, someone supported and helped him. Otherwise, he should still be on the run. Yibai also talked to Dr. Banner. They used to be friends and had some common topics. Dr. Banner even asked Yibai why he had stopped writing books during this time. You should know that Yibai used to write books very quickly. With his writing speed, he could publish 3 books a month. For this question, Yibai just smiled. He couldn't say that he had made enough money and now he only intended to enjoy life. Not long after Dr. Banner left, Tony came to Yibai with pepper. "Yibai, I'm really glad you came. I'll also be a good man like you in the future." Tony held a glass of red wine in his hand and said to Yibai with some emotion. Yes, this playboy had decided to change himself, and he would be a real superhero from now on. Hela, on the other hand, communicated with Pepper, which was unprecedented. You should know that Hela used to ignore everyone except Yibai. By the way, didn't you invite Thor? I haven't seen him all night. Yibai asked Tony. He also wanted to find a chance to take care of his brother-in-law. I invited him, but Thor's girlfriend Jane had some accidents, so he rushed over there. Tony shrugged and said with some regret. He and Thor were good friends. This time when he said goodbye to being single, Thor didn't come. So he was a little sad. After listening to Tony's words, Yibai suddenly thought that this should be the beginning of the plot of Thor 2. Episode 95, Dark Elves Attack, Saving Frigga, Part 1. At the edge of the universe, in a star field of eternal darkness. On a huge spaceship, Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves, suddenly felt something and looked up in a certain direction. The next moment, his whole body shook with excitement. It's the ether particles, I feel it. The ether particles have revived, and the long-awaited opportunity of the Night Elves has finally arrived. Malekith said excitedly and soon woke up all the Dark Elves on the entire spaceship. Ether particles, the treasure of the Dark Elves, a great power that could rewrite reality. Back then, the Dark Elves almost dragged the entire 9 realms into the darkness with ether particles. Later they were stopped by Asgard in a great battle in which the ether particles were sealed and most of the Dark Elves were either killed or wounded. Only some of the remaining Dark Elves, led by their leader Malekith, survived by hiding in this eternal dark corner of the universe until today. From the moment our homeland was destroyed, we have been looking forward to this day. We desire a great revenge and we look forward to reclaiming what we have lost. Today, my people, our opportunity has finally come and our expectations have finally come true. Our most precious ether particles have finally revived. Will you follow me? To return to the 9 realms, to regain our glory, and to wash away our past shame with the blood of our enemies. Malekith shouted at the remaining Dark Elves to flame their passion. His words were answered with a loud cry by the other Dark Elves, just as he expected. We are willing to return to the 9 realms, to reclaim our glory, and to wash away our shame with the blood of our enemies. The Dark Elves shouted out their desires with clear voices. They were eager to take revenge, for which they had been waiting for so long. Well, listen to my order, change the spaceship's course and return to the 9 realms. Malekith nodded with great satisfaction and ordered the helmsman of his ship to sail towards the 9 realms. The flames of revenge were burning in his eyes. Asgard, I am back. Earth, in front of Yibai's manor. Thor, with the restless Jane Fox, stood outside the gate and waited quietly. Soon, Yibai came to the door. When he saw Thor and his girlfriend, he quickly let the 2 of them in. When they returned to the manor, Hela was already waiting for them. Queen of Asgard, please save my girlfriend, she has encountered something bad. As soon as Thor saw Hela, he couldn't wait to beg. Hela nodded slightly, then looked at the restless Jane, Thor's mortal girlfriend. As the Queen of Gods of Asgard, today's Hela was much stronger than before. So at a glance, she could see that Jane had encountered something special. It's really interesting that you exist in my perception for a moment and then disappear the next moment. Hela commented because this was the first time she had seen something like this. As for the reason, Hela also guessed it. Ether particles, or the legendary reality stone as it was called, had the great power to rewrite reality. And Jane's current state was caused by her fusion with ether particles. In other words, Jane Fox's body now carried the reality stone, one of the 6 infinity stones. What should I do? Can you save me? Jane asked Hela nervously, not daring to meet Hela's eyes. This was also normal. Hela was now the queen of Asgard, and her majesty in front of outsiders was still very great. Yes, but not here. I'm going to take you back to Asgard, where I can take the ether particles out of your body. Just in return, how about Asgard will keep these ether particles instead of you? Hela said faintly and stated her own terms. This condition was not too much. After all, when people died, even something as precious as reality stone was useless. Jane Fox did not hesitate and nodded quickly. She was still young and did not want to die yet. Thor was also relieved to see this, and the idiotic smile on his face returned. Hela also nodded with satisfaction. It was a fair and reasonable deal. Then, Hela looked at Yibai. What about you? Would you like to make a trip back to Asgard with us, my dear? Hela asked Yibai. She would be very happy if Yibai agreed. Yibai nodded and agreed to Hela's proposal. He wanted to go over and take a look, as he was a little worried. After all, this was the reality stone, one of the most practical stone among infinity stones. Among the 6 infinity stones, not all stones could exert great power when held alone. For example, the space stone, in addition to having unlimited energy, it only had the power to move in space. In addition, there was also soul stone. Its holder would not gain strong abilities. Another example was power stone or reality stone. Even if they were held alone, they could exert a terrible destructive power. This was related to the properties of infinity stones. In fact, all stones existed at the same level. It was just a question of whether they could be used effectively. This was the main reason why Infinity Gauntlet was so valuable. Infinity Gauntlet could perfectly display the power of infinity stones. Everyone should know what would happen when the 6 infinity stones were gathered. In Thor 2, if Yibai remembered correctly, Dark Elves would attack Asgard. Although the Dark Elves were nothing in front of Hela, Malekith, the king of Dark Elves, could use ether particles. Could Hela deal with reality stone? This was questionable. Yibai didn't know the answer, so he had to follow her and have a look. If she couldn't deal with it, he would help her. This was his foolproof plan. After getting Yibai's reply, Hela's eyes were much milder. But just because there were outsiders, and she didn't show much emotion. Then let's go now. Hela said to the crowd, then took out the space stone and opened a space channel about 3 meters high. Without hesitation, everyone entered the channel, one after another. When they came back to their senses, they had already reached the land of Asgard. Because of his relationship with Hela, Yibai was already very familiar with Asgard. On the contrary, it was Jane Fox, who was here for the first time and looked around as soon as she came, looking very curious about everything. Soon, the crowd saw Frigga, who was waiting for the crowd as if she had known that they would be here. Hela, welcome home, Yibai, you too. Frigga said to Hela and Yibai, with a smile at the corners of her mouth, her eyes gentle and kind. Frigga had always been in favor of Hela and Yibai being together. She just couldn't convince the stubborn Odin, otherwise Odin wouldn't have died. However, Frigga did not have any opinion on Yibai and Hela because of this. Instead, she observed this matter with the mentality of an elder. That's why Yibai still respected the former queen in his heart. Then Frigga saw Thor and Jane behind him. Episode 96, Dark Elves Attack, Saving Frigga, Part 2. Frigga, who was already smiling, smiled even more brightly. Thor, you finally came back to see me. Is this your lover? She is so beautiful. Frigga said to Jane with a loving look. It was like she was looking at her daughter-in-law. This was the biggest difference between Frigga and Odin. If Odin was still alive then after seeing Hela and Yibai, plus Thor and Jane, he might have died because of his anger. It was hard for him to give birth to 2 children, but it turned out that both of them slept with mortals. What a family misfortune. After chatting with Frigga, Hela left with Jane. They went to take out the ether particles from Jane's body. Hence, it was really inconvenient for Yibai and Thor to follow them as Yibai and Thor had nothing to do with this. As the guard of Asgard, Heimdall had a pair of eyes that could see through the 9 realms. In addition, his eyes could see through any disguise, which made him the most suitable guardian for detecting enemy situations. After Hela inherited the throne of the gods, Heimdall was not fired by Hela, instead he was reused. Heimdall also did not choose to retire because his mission was to be faithful to the God-King of Asgard. Since Hela became the God Queen of Asgard, he would naturally be loyal to Hela as well. Today, as usual, Heimdall stood at the head of the Rainbow Bridge and watched over the 9 realms. Suddenly, Heimdall looked up at the sky as if he had sensed something. This glance suddenly made Heimdall very nervous. Because in Heimdall's eyes, the originally calm sky was full of all kinds of individual spaceships, as well as a huge, cone-shaped spaceship. An enemy attack. Heimdall thought of these 2 words instantly. These enemy ships had a cloaking/stealth device, so they were not visible to normal people, only Heimdall could see them. After realizing that the people of Asgard had still not found the enemy, Heimdall felt that he had to do something. He immediately left the control room of the Rainbow Bridge, picked up his weapon, and ran on the Rainbow Bridge. When an individual spaceship passed by him, he jumped down from the Rainbow Bridge directly onto the spaceship. Then he raised the big sword in his hand and fiercely inserted it into the spaceship. The next moment, the hull of the individual ship was pierced, the stealth system failed instantly, and the whereabouts of the individual ship were exposed. Perhaps because the enemy felt that their tracks had been exposed, the other ships that had invaded Asgard simply stopped being invisible and revealed themselves. And this time, the people of Asgard were stunned. Here we go again, another invasion of Asgard. The loud sirens soon sounded in Asgard, and the horns symbolizing the arrival of the enemy were also sounded. Countless Asgardians picked up their weapons one after another, spontaneously gathered, and began to run towards the direction of the enemy. A sailing boat-like spaceship, started by the Asgardians, took off from the city and headed towards the enemy's spaceship. From discovering the enemy to mobilizing the army, the Asgardians adjusted everything in a very short period of time. The instinct of war was engraved in the flesh and blood of the people of Asgard. Thor, who was drinking with Yi-Bai, also changed from his drunken and fluffy state at this time, and a murderous aura flashed in his eyes. "I'll be right back," Thor said to Yi-Bai, then turned around and ran out of the pub. Yi-Bai shook his head, knowing that the Dark Elves had arrived. In the plot, the Dark Elves' attack did huge damage to Asgard, and the city of Asgard was almost destroyed. But after Hela took power, this kind of thing would not happen. The current Asgard was different from the former Asgard under Odin's rule. Thinking of this, Yi-Bai also put down the glass of wine in his hand, and got up and walked in the opposite direction of Thor. If Yi-Bai remembered correctly, this was the point when Frigga would die. Yi-Bai still respected the gentle and kind former queen. If possible, Yi-Bai was willing to save her. Soon, Yi-Bai followed his memory and came to Asgard's prison. Regardless of outside matters, Yi-Bai walked directly into the prison. Sure enough, Yi-Bai saw Frigga in front of Loki's cell. Frigga was also very surprised when she saw Yi-Bai, because she knew that Yi-Bai had no reason to come to such a place. "Yi-Bai, are you looking for me?" Although Frigga was surprised, she still stood up and said to Yi-Bai, "There's danger here, so Hela asked me to come and protect you." Yi-Bai also did not hide, but he transferred the credit to Hela. He hoped that this would make the relationship between mother and daughter a little closer. After hearing Yi-Bai's words, Frigga was really happy, but Loki in the cell snorted coldly. He hadn't forgotten about his previous severe beating by Hela. For this cruel, uncompromising queens of gods, Loki had no good feelings at all. At the same time, Loki was wondering why there was a mortal in Asgard. And it looked like this mortal had a good relationship with Hela. Maybe he could take advantage of it. Loki was indeed worthy of being the god of tricks, worthy of being the most trickiest man. The first time Loki saw Yi-Bai, he thought of a very deadly plan. What he did not know was that doing so would be a death sentence for himself. Leaving Loki aside, not long after Yi-Bai came to Frigga, a strong force directly blasted open a distant cell door. Then, a monster more than 2 meters tall, wearing black armor, with a hideous face stepped out of that cell. He was the secret trump card of the Dark Elves, the Cursed Warrior. The strength of the cursed warrior in the movie was very strong. He completely crushed Thor. In the movie, the cursed warrior who got into prison through a secret passage, kidnapped Frigga, and threatened Odin and Thor, the 2 Asgardians with the strongest combat power, which directly led to the collapse of the defense line in Asgard City and also caused the death of Frigga. And since Yi-Bai had the opportunity to change all of this, of course he would not sit back and watch these things happen. So Yi-Bai did not go to the front line to deal with those dark elves, like Thor, but came to the prison to protect Frigga. The cursed warrior also spotted Frigga and realized that he had found a big fish. He immediately rushed towards Frigga without thinking. As for Yi Bai, a mere mortal, the cursed soldiers had not paid him any attention at all. Even Loki thought that Yi Bai would die. After all, mortals are very fragile. Episode 97, Crushing the Cursed Warrior. The cursed warrior was powerful and could easily crush Thor. Moreover, he was tall, strong, and looked very intimidating when he rushed up. In terms of one-on-one combat, this cursed warrior could even kill Hulk. Unfortunately, Yi Bai was not Hulk. Seeing the cursed warrior rushing towards him like a wild horse, Yi Bai's eyes did not change at all. When the cursed warrior came in front of him, Yi Bai made a move. Before the cursed warrior could hit him, with a far faster speed than the cursed warrior, Yi Bai punched his chest with a punch. The sound of clicking came from the chest of the cursed warrior, and a dent visible to the naked eye appeared on the armor of the cursed warrior at the place hit by Yi Bai's fist. Who knew how many bones of the cursed warrior were broken because of Yi Bai's punch? The cursed warrior's hideous and ugly face also showed a painful look, and then his whole body flew like a cannonball out of the chamber. But Yi Bai did not give the cursed warrior any chance. The moment the cursed warrior was about to fly backwards, Yi Bai grabbed his right arm and forced him to stay. Then Yi Bai took the cursed warrior's right arm as a fulcrum and waved him around. Loki saw that the tall cursed warrior was like a large doll in Yi Bai's hands, without the slightest resistance. Yi Bai waved the cursed warrior around a few times and then smashed him to the ground fiercely. A loud bang sounded as the cursed warrior was smashed to the ground. That huge force even smashed the prison floor, and spider web-like cracks spread all over the prison floor. After being hit so hard twice in a row, the cursed warrior gave up. At this moment, he was lying on the ground, looking at the ceiling of the prison. However, Yi Bai did not give the cursed warrior any chance. He stepped on the neck of the cursed warrior to kill him quickly. "Goodbye," Yi Bai said lightly to the cursed soldier, and then instantly applied force through his foot on the cursed warrior's neck. The click sound of bone breaking sounded again, which was even more creepy this time. Seeing all this, Loki became frightened and even felt his scalp numb. He didn't think that his body was stronger than the cursed warrior. If he were to be replaced by the cursed warrior, perhaps Yi Bai could hammer him to death with one punch. Is this really a mortal? Loki screamed madly in his heart. He was really frightened. At the same time, he was very glad that he didn't have time to implement his plan. Otherwise, maybe what happened to the cursed warrior would be his fate. When he had learned that Yi Bai was a mortal and had a good relationship with Hela, Loki had come up with a plan. The plan was to control Yi Bai, and then to blackmail and force Hela. It was Odin's blessing that his plan had not been implemented, and no one knew about it. Only after he witnessed Yi Bai's strength, Loki knew how deadly his previous plan was. In particular, Yi Bai looked at him with a smile after finishing the cursed warrior. This glance made Loki almost jump up in fear. There was an illustration in his heart. Under Yi Bai's eyes, he felt that his mind had been seen through. It was not strange that he had jumped up. Yi Bai didn't care about Loki's thoughts. The glance just now was just a warning to Loki. After all, this was a man who was not afraid of heaven and earth. He was really the most trickiest man in the universe. He could do anything. If he didn't warn him, who knows how much trouble he would bring to Yi Bai. Although Yi Bai didn't care, Loki was still one of his brother-in-laws. He was not like Thor. Thor was still related to Hela by blood, so Yi Bai would somewhat take care of him. As long as Loki didn't cause Yi Bai trouble, Yi Bai would not bother to care about him. "Let's go out first, we don't know what's going on out there yet," Yi Bai said to Frigga. Now that the cursed warrior had been killed, Frigga's future had changed. The only thing left was to stop the Dark Elves' ambition. Outside, the Dark Elves had arrived outside the city of Asgard, ready to move in with a large army. But there was now an obstacle in front of them, and that was the Asgard's barrier, which protected the city of Asgard. This was the city of Asgard's last line of defense, and it could even withstand the attacks of giants. It was absolutely difficult to cross the barrier. Malekith looked at the city of Asgard's barrier that was blocking him and his army, and his eyes were a little anxious. According to the plan, the cursed warrior should have started to act now to break through this barrier. Both of them needed to work together from inside and outside. Otherwise, if the cursed warrior was eliminated, they won't have the slightest chance. "Use the singularity bomb and blast this barrier apart," Malekith said to his men. The singularity bomb was also one of his trump cards, and it was also the main reason why he dared to attack Asgard. Soon, under the control of the Dark Elves, a black bomb was fired from the head of the largest conical ship. The black bomb immediately hit the barrier and exploded. It created a tiny singularity in an instant, which began to swallow everything around it madly. The so-called singularity actually referred to the core of a black hole. The biggest function of the singularity bomb was to create a small black hole. This was a very terrible weapon that could easily destroy a planet. After all, even if it was just a small black hole, it was still a black hole. In an instant, the tiny black hole created by the singularity bomb swallowed an enormous amount of energy from the barrier of the city of Asgard. The miniature black hole absorbed an enormous amount of energy, and the barrier of the city of Asgard broke for the second time after it was blown apart by attack. Seeing that the barrier was finally broken by himself, Malekith immediately ordered the Dark Elves behind him to attack. Then the mighty Dark Elf single-soldier spaceship, like a swarm of wasps, in the sky above the city of Asgard rushed towards the gap in the barrier. Asgard's individual ships also attacked the invaders, one after another. Some defense devices deployed in Asgard's urban area also poured out their firepower and continued to harvest the Dark Elves' individual ships. At the beginning of the war, the scene was already very cruel. There were Dark Elves dying all the time. Now Asgard's firepower was far stronger than when Odin was in power, and it caused tremendous damage to the Dark Elf spaceships in the blink of an eye. Moreover, this time there was no cursed warrior who disturbed the situation from the rear. Episode 98, Hela's Reality Stone. When Yibai came outside, the scale of war on the field had tilted towards Asgard. Sailboat-shaped individual spaceships, under the control of Asgard's soldiers, constantly encircled and suppressed the spaceships of the Dark Elves. Thor also showed brilliant performance in this war and almost became the center of the battlefield. Countless thunders surrounded Thor, turning the sky into a sea of thunder. The thunder would attack any Dark Elf spaceship that passed by Thor. In only a few seconds, Thor, the god of thunder, had destroyed thousands of Dark Elf spaceships. Looking at Thor, the god of thunder, Malekith's eyes revealed a deep hatred. In this battle with Asgard, the Dark Elves themselves suffered heavy losses. These were the only remaining members of the tribe. If one Dark Elf died, it means that there would be one less Dark Elf left in the universe. You could even say that every time Thor killed a Dark Elf, Malekith's heart trembled. But this was war, and Malekith could only force himself to calm down. The most important thing right now was to get the ether particles, which was the best opportunity for them to turn the table on Asgard. In Malekith's perception, the ether particles were in the city of Asgard. Attack, rush in, and victory will be ours, Malekith said to the rest of his people. At this point in time, the Dark Elves had no way back. They could only bet that they will get the ether particles before being completely annihilated by Asgard. In that case, they still had the possibility of turning over. Following Malekith's orders, the other Dark Elves drove their individual spaceships and rushed towards the center of Asgard like moths to the fire. Malekith gradually approached the location of the ether particles under the cover of his people's life. Finally, Malekith arrived in front of the Golden Palace. Hela had taken Jane Fox into the Golden Palace to take out the ether particles, which was the reality stone from her body. Now, no one can stop me, Malekith thought to himself and walked towards the Golden Palace. He believed that as long as he got the ether particles, he would be invincible. Asgard would also tremble under his darkness. Just then, the door of the Golden Palace suddenly opened, and Hela slowly walked out of the Golden Palace. What made Malekith's breath quicker was that in Hela's hand, the reality stone that had almost turned into a liquid state was constantly trembling and changing into various shapes. Ether particles! Malekith shouted, his eyes fixed on the ether particles, and the desire in his eyes was self-evident. Hela also noticed the Dark Elf in front of her and knew that this was Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves. You shouldn't have brought the ether particles to me. Looking at Hela, who was holding ether particles in her hands, Malekith said slowly and felt that he had won. Malekith knew so much about the ether particles that he was confident that he could regain control of the ether particles, even if the ether particles were currently in Hela's hands. But unfortunately for him, Hela didn't say anything after listening to him. She even wanted to laugh a little. You can try it and see if the ether particles will respond to you, Hela said fearlessly. Her confident attitude also made Malekith feel bad. He began to call out the ether particles eagerly, hoping to make the ether particles come back to him. But what made Malekith feel horrified was that his call was like a stone sinking into the sea, and the ether particles did not respond to him at all. This reality made Malekith almost desperate. He considered himself the master of ether particles, and he thought that he could easily call the ether particles back to his side. But the cruel reality gave him a hard slap. The ether particles didn't respond to him at all. Ether particles were the only thing Malekith was counting on. If there were no ether particles, he would not be able to compete with Asgard at all. Then his act of leading his tribe to invade Asgard was no longer a great revenge, but a foolish death. A heaven or hell, the key to everything was the ether particles. It seems that you are not able to make the ether particles listen to you. I think this is probably because the ether particles have a new master. Hela looked at Malekith's panic and said arrogantly. Then, under Malekith's desperate and unbelievable eyes, Hela controlled the ether particles to spin around her. Its obedient posture was as if it was the same as Hela's pet. This is impossible. How can you control ether particles? This is the treasure of dark elves. Why can you, an Asgardian, control it? Malekith asked in disbelief. He couldn't accept the reality before him. It was just that the ether particles didn't listen to his call. But why could Hela still control them? His greatest dependence had now become the greatest help of the enemy in an instant. This reality was very difficult for Malekith to accept. Hela didn't rush to kill Malekith, instead she looked at him playfully. It's very simple. I just talked to it and made it realize that I am its best master. As Hela's voice fell, a yellow stone appeared in Hela's hand. Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, was the fundamental reason Hela could control ether particles. She used the Mind Stone to communicate with the ether particles and successfully got the recognition of the ether particles. This was also the fundamental reason why Hela would stand in front of Malekith with ether particles. Although Hela was strong and domineering, she was not without brains. If she had no absolute certainty, why would she bring the ether particles in front of Malekith? She was crazy, but not stupid. Malekith also realized that he had no chance at all. His biggest reliance, ether particles, fell into Hela's hands, and he couldn't do anything. When he thought of bringing his people to death because of his stupid decision, Malekith felt regretful in his heart. How good would it have been if he had not chosen revenge at that time, but continued to lead his people to live? Unfortunately, there was no chance of regret in this world. Malekith, who was desperate, raised his head again after a brief loss. This time, his eyes were full of madness. Since his death was already predetermined, it was better for him to put up a fight. The beast that was cornered and on its last legs would not lose the courage to fight to the death. With a roar of regret towards the tribe, Malekith rushed towards Hela, holding his weapon. He was already determined to die, so he was fearless. Hela looked at Malekith, who rushed towards her, but her eyes were still very disdainful. The leader of the Dark Elf gave her the biggest impression of stupidity. Stupid decision, stupid opponent. He was worthless. Killing such an opponent would never make Hela happy. But Hela did not feel soft. Under Hera's control, the ether particles around her turned into a torrent and swept towards Malekith. And in a short time, Malekith was submerged. Then Malekith's body began to disappear. The ether particles had directly erased his existence. Ether particles, which should have been the strongest weapon in his hands, were now the means to kill him. It was cruel, but this was reality. Episode 99, Hydra Exposed, Hela Scheme, Part 1. With Hela taking control of the ether particles, the end of Malekith was sealed. And after the death of Malekith, the war came to an end. For Asgard, this was a big victory. Hela obtained ether particles, which was actually the reality stone. Now she had 3 infinity stones in her hand. Over time, Hela even had the opportunity to gather 6 infinity stones and become the female version of Thanos. Even if this was not the case, the difficulty for Thanos to collect 6 infinity stones in the future was also raised to the nightmare level. Thanos could hardly handle just one Hela, let alone Yubai. Hela stuff was also Yubai stuff. Would Yubai really give Thanos a chance to steal his infinite stones? It was absolutely impossible. In addition, one of Asgard's old enemies, the Dark Elves. After this war, they were completely extinct. From now on, there would be no Dark Elves in the universe again. Malekith paid a heavy price for his foolishness. In fact, Malekith's war against Asgard was by itself a very foolish act. Even in the original plot of Thor 2, the strength of both sides was not equal. The only reason why Malekith could bring great damage to Asgard in Thor 2 was because he was lucky in the final analysis. First was the Cursed Warrior. The Cursed Warrior was holding Frigga hostage, which caused Odin and Thor, Asgard's 2 strongest warriors, to be restrained. Secondly, Odin was unable to control the ether particles and was taken advantage of by Malekith. When Yibai killed the cursed warrior and Hela took control of the ether particles, Malekith was doomed to fail. He had no chance of turning the tables. He had not even the slightest chance at all. Instead, his stupidity sent the Dark Elves to a dead end, and at the same time brought Asgard a hearty victory. With 2 victorious wars in a row, Hela's throne became more and more secure, and the people of Asgard would never oppose a queen who could bring them victory. Some people were happy, and some were worried. While Asgard celebrated the victory of the war, Nick Fury was in deep trouble. He had already noticed that there was a problem within S.H.I.E.L.D. In fact, there were already signs, but Nick Fury himself had ignored them. However, after the Battle of the New York City, Nick Fury suddenly discovered that there was a force inside S.H.I.E.L.D. that was beyond his control. So Nick Fury started a secret investigation. Then, Nick Fury was horrified to discover a fact. There was Hydra inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury cursed madly. He originally thought that Hydra had infiltrated into S.H.I.E.L.D. Only after an investigation did he find that he was the one who had infiltrated the Hydra's S.H.I.E.L.D. According to Nick Fury's preliminary estimate, at least a quarter of the personnel within the S.H.I.E.L.D. might be members of Hydra. This number was so scary that Nick Fury even turned pale. He suspected that someone was going to kill him, which was very likely to happen soon. What was even more difficult for Nick Fury to accept was that within S.H.I.E.L.D., the leader of Hydra was likely to be his old friend, Alexander Pierce. Nick Fury and Alexander Pierce had a very good relationship, and they were almost lifelong friends. Nick Fury also had great trust in Pierce. Except for the confidentiality principle, he had never kept anything secret from Pierce. But such a life-and-death friend of his was actually the leader of Hydra. This reality was very difficult for Nick Fury to accept. Even Pierce was Hydra, Nick Fury did not even know who he should trust anymore. Just as Nick Fury was distressed, a knock on his room door interrupted Nick Fury's thoughts. Nick Fury also quickly sorted out his suit to prevent his anxious appearance from being seen by outsiders. Then he said, "Come in." Soon, the door was opened, and Pierce came in full of energy. "Nick Fury, I noticed that you are investigating S.H.I.E.L.D. in secret recently. Did you find anything?" As soon as Pierce said the first sentence, Nick Fury almost jumped up. Damn it, it's all discovered. Hadn't he been secret enough? Hydra's infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D. had actually reached this point. Nick Fury roared inwardly, he felt that the matter was getting more and more serious. But on the surface, he still had to act as if nothing had happened. "Pierce, who told you about this?" Nick Fury asked Pierce as if it had never happened. "Don't pretend, you can't hide your actions from me." Pierce smiled contemptuously. He knew Nick Fury's tricks very well. After decades of working with Nick Fury, even if he was the leader of Hydra, Pierce had to admit that Nick Fury was a powerful character. The title of the King of Agents was not boasted by Nick Fury, but recognized by many people. Even if there really is this thing, it doesn't concern you. It's not something you should be in charge of. Nick Fury raised his eyebrows and said to Pierce with a very tough attitude. He was basically sure of Pierce's identity now, he was undoubtedly a Hydra. In other words, his once closest comrade in arms was now an enemy. So Nick Fury's attitude was also very impolite, and even a bit rude. "Well, it seems you already know, so I won't hide it." "You are right, I am indeed a Hydra." Pierce confessed directly and caught Nick Fury by surprise. Moreover, shouldn't he refused to admit this kind of thing, and then look for opportunities to kill me to seize power? Is it really good to admit it so generously? Or, is there a conspiracy? Nick Fury was very alert because he couldn't figure out why Pierce confessed. You should know that him doing such a thing was equivalent to giving up resistance and putting his neck down for Nick Fury's knife to cut. "Do you know what you are talking about? Are you serious?" Nick Fury pretended to be shocked, but in fact he had secretly pressed a button. Within 3 minutes, Coulson should break in with someone. Pierce nodded. He was no longer worried that Hydra would be suppressed by Nick Fury when it was exposed. "Don't pretend, I know you know exactly who I am, you have investigated me clearly these days. Don't be nervous. I mean no harm to you, and I won't kill you here," Pierce said with a smile, but his smile made Nick Fury's scalp numb. There was definitely something wrong, and the problem was very serious. Pierce's confident look made Nick Fury wonder what he was going to do. For this guy, it was absolutely impossible for him to confess his identity if he was not sure. So what exactly was this guy's trump card? Episode 100, Hydra Exposed, Hela Scheme, Part 2. Just as Nick Fury and Pierce were in a tense confrontation, Coulson barged in with his men. Coulson led more than a dozen agents with guns into the office nervously, aiming their guns at the surroundings. But when he found out that there was only Nick Fury and Pierce in the room, Coulson was confused. "Sir, what's the situation?" Coulson asked Nick Fury, and at the same time looked at Pierce. Coulson was a firm confidant of Nick Fury and only obeyed Nick Fury, so he would naturally look at the other person in the room with caution. Nick Fury also got up, walked out of his seat, and then stood beside Coulson. "Grab him, this guy is Hydra," Nick Fury said to Coulson. He decided to get Pierce under control first. No matter what tricks Pierce had, as long as he controlled him, could he do anything? After listening to Nick Fury's instructions, Coulson looked at Pierce in shock. Then he raised his gun without hesitation and aimed at Pierce. But in the next second, both Nick Fury and Coulson were stunned. Because all the agents that Coulson brought over with him actually aimed their guns at both of them. Nick Fury had at least 5 or 6 guns on his bald head. All of them were Hydra. Not only Nick Fury was stunned by this sudden change, but Coulson was also stunned. This good old boy, the agent who had the name of a comic book Marvel's novice village head, at this time was doubtful of life. At this moment, Pierce came over and grinned at Nick Fury, who was angry and shocked. "Nick Fury, I said earlier that I just want to talk to you. Why do you have to be like this?" Pierce said proudly. He was very happy now. He had wanted to do this for a long time. He felt good watching Nick Fury get defeated. Nick Fury, whose face had always been dark and scary, he was very furious. Was there any reason in this world? Was there any law? At the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. He, the magnificent director of S.H.I.E.L.D., was actually held hostage by Hydra with a gun to his head. Even if he didn't die today, this was a matter of shame for him, and it was a black history that was destined to be unwashed. "What do you want to do? Or you are going to kill me, here." Nick Fury was furious, and he felt that his fame was completely gone. So his tone was very rude, and he yelled at Pierce. But in fact, he was thinking about how to get out of this embarrassing situation. "I just want to talk to you. We need to have a good talk." Pierce also put away his proud expression and said sincerely to Nick Fury. Nick Fury was taken aback when he heard this. It was that simple? "Well, let's talk. You let these people out first." Nick Fury glanced at the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who were pointing their guns at him, and said to Pierce. Without hesitation, Pierce agreed and asked everyone to go out first. In Nick Fury's office, once again, only the two of them were left. "Tell me, what exactly do you want? But let me tell you, even if you kill me, there's no way S.H.I.E.L.D. will fall into the hands of Hydra," Nick Fury said to Pierce, not forgetting to give himself a chance to survive. Although his performance was tough, Nick Fury was actually panicking right now. He even felt that those Hydras would smash his head. "To tell you the truth, if it was before, I would kill you and try to control S.H.I.E.L.D. But now, I don't need to do that. Now, I just want to cooperate with you." Pierce sincerely said to Nick Fury that he really just wanted to cooperate with Nick Fury. Why did Nick Fury's reaction have to be so big? Couldn't they just sit down and talk? Why did they have to kill each other? Nick Fury sneered and refused to comment. Inwardly, he thought that if he was lucky enough not to die today, he would tear off Pierce's head. Dare to point a gun at my head. If I don't take revenge, I swear I won't be a man. However, Pierce's next sentence made Nick Fury jump up again. Actually, our Hydra is already under the leadership of Goddess Hela. I'm not afraid that you will liquidate us afterwards. Pierce told Nick Fury about his trump card, which was also the main reason why he was qualified to talk about cooperation with Nick Fury. Speaking of this, Pierce was glad that he made a really wise decision before. If he hadn't found the Goddess Hela as his backer, he would be nervously thinking about how to kill Nick Fury at the moment. How could he be like this? Confident and unhurried. This was the advantage of having a backer. Wait. What you said is true. Because of being shocked, Nick Fury's voice was much louder. After all, the news was so unbelievable and so scary. Was this Pierce's confidence? No wonder he dared to show down directly in front of him. Nick Fury had a headache. If what Pierce said was true, then he really didn't dare to do anything to Hydra. Hydra looked very powerful, but it was actually weak. Otherwise, why would Hydra hide? Wasn't it because they had no backer? All the power of the Hydra was hidden in the darkness and could not see the light. Because once it saw the light, it would be destroyed immediately. The current Hydra did not have the support of a strong country. But it was different with Hela. Hela was the queen of Asgard. Going against Hela meant going against Asgard, and that would cause diplomatic disputes between the two civilizations. But why did Nick Fury feel that this routine was very familiar? As for why Nick Fury thought that this routine was so familiar. Because Hela was inspired by the United States, the lighthouse of freedom. Since the United States could do it, then why could not Hela do it? So, let's talk about cooperation. How about the coexistence of Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D.? Let's work together to maintain the order of this world. Pierce said to Nick Fury with a smile. He liked to watch Nick Fury be deflated. There's no need to mention how cool Pierce felt when he stood tall in front of Nick Fury. Nick Fury was silent. He didn't know how to answer Pierce. He wanted to refuse, but he knew he could not refuse. Just like those third-class countries, could they refuse the United States? Strength was the foundation of everything. Without strength, he did not even have the qualifications to say no. Nick Fury knew very well that even if this matter was reported to a higher level, or even the national government, it would still end in compromise. In front of Asgard, human beings were like a third-class country, and they did not even have the qualifications to say no.